Hey, welcome this morning. Well, it's morning for some of us anyway, who've gathered together or are starting to gather together this Sunday morning. Or welcome to you if you've found us on YouTube or somehow later in the week grabbed this Facebook live stream and used it to sort of provide you a centering moment in your busy week. So as we kind of welcome people to the platform this morning, of course, feel free to shout out to each other. Let folks know that you're here and a part of this little community this morning for the next 30 or 40 minutes. Hopefully, I've been kind of scrambling this week, to be honest with you. It's been a kind of a tough week again. After coming back from vacation, as so many of you probably are doing too, thinking about the realities of fall. Knowing that our kids' lives and lives of households are so up in the air with this kind of pullback we've had to have now that the pandemic is raging in California again. The politics, the economics, the health concerns, the environmental concerns, not being able to be together as a spiritual community physically. I wander around our own church site day after day, and it's quiet and silent and empty. It's just a weird feeling. So, it's always great to come together on a Sunday morning, and whether we're, we can't be together physically, but I know that we're connected in some deep way as we try to all find our own path as we wayfare through all of this. And that's what I want to spend some time with today. So welcome, glad you're here. Great to see everybody popping on board. I want to do a few things today, kind of an eclectic. I was talking to one of our parishioners the other day about these little talks that we have on Sunday morning, and he reminded me, I listened to them, but you're all over the map. I mean, you're just constantly bringing in all sorts of different perspectives and insights. Some I agree with, some I don't agree with, but it's sort of a splash of spirituality that I hope to dive into today. And it all started, at least the impetus of today's reflections, when I was watching a Netflix documentary kind of show this week called Stateless. And that show was about it was a series about the immigration kind of holding centers in Australia. And as Australia was struggling to integrate so many folks who were arriving at their shores, seeking asylum there, fearful for their lives and their homeland, Australia was really struggling of what to do with these people. And the processing times and the holding times for families and children just drug on for years and years. And in these centers where people were being held, of course, frustration grew, abuse grew, violence grew, mistreatment grew, desperation grew. These folks who found themselves in a stateless frame of mind and presence, right? They couldn't find home. We're all kind of locked down in this space. And in one of the scenes in this series, one kind of, I guess you'd call them detainee, was speaking to another detainee and just talking about how when you get stuck in these spaces where you don't have home, you begin to, construct another reality in your mind. And you sort of have to be careful about what is that reality you're constructing, because it can either, take you down a rabbit hole or provide sort of a sense of holding a future that you're longing for. And it struck me that we're all sort of in that stateless state right now, right? We're drawing back again into our private spaces. We're challenged to kind of imagine what the future might hold for us. We have a sense of longing and wanting to kind of both be faithful to our past, but realize that there's so many broken parts of the system right now that we have to be able to imagine a future together, individually and collectively. We're all kind of stuck in this, it's not a prison necessarily, but sometimes it feels like that. We're sort of stuck here in this nowhere land for a moment. As adults, as children, as kids getting ready to go off to college, people with vocations who are scrambling to figure out whether those vocations have a future or even a present. All of that is requiring us to kind of spark some sort of inner insight or wisdom that can help provide a light, a shining light for the way forward. So a couple of ways to do that today as sort of spiritual people I want to reflect on. To do that, I've lit my candle here in our little office here at home. And I would invite you to light a candle today as well. And at the end of our time together, I'm going to kind of at least put a project for you to do on the table. Whether you do it or not, it's up to you. But that project is sort of driven by the way in which I want you to think of your candlelight this morning. And today, let that candle, and as I lit my own, let it kind of hold for you sort of your own, like the wisdom that you're nurturing within. Maybe the revelations that are coming to you during this time, even in this second wave of having to pull back. What are those insights, those revelations, those glimpses of wisdom or depth that you want to hold on to as a kind of a guiding light for you moving forward? Right? We can quickly scramble past this time, and I've said that over and over again, and kind of put things back the way they were, like the whole Humpty Dumpty imagery. But I think it's so important for us to figure out ways to hold the wisdom of these moments as we find ourselves in this stateless experience, and allow those to be our guiding principles going forward. So today I'm just going to ask you to light a candle and take a deep breath and ground yourself wherever you are. Maybe just have a moment of silence together collectively, and let the flicker of that light capture the all that's going on within you, maybe personally and maybe even in your own family system. The insights, the wisdom, the character of longing that might be a guiding light for you as we move into the future. And so I'll pause and take a couple of deep breaths and invite you to do the same. And just feel the hum of your body and the way in which you're situated this morning. Let it kind of hold you for a moment as you kind of get in touch with your own flesh and blood today. And then imagine that candle that flickers, the warmth of it, the sparkle, the wonder, the mystery of that flame. Let it tether you to all the wonder that is glowing within, shining within. The new insights and moments of reflection you've had along this journey. Let that candle be a holding place for all of that. And then take one more breath. And let's continue together. All right. Sorry, I got something in my throat this morning. Lovely that you're with us today. So let's get rolling, shall we? I wanted to kind of think about for a second with you today and let you kind of reflect on this too. And then at the end of our time together, as I said, I'm going to give you a project to work on, an arts and crafts project you can do as a household to kind of help frame this. I'm trying to figure out, so how do we bring our spiritual selves to this condition that we're in? And that's really what I'm spending time doing with you on this Facebook live feed is, there's so many things to think about as far as social justice, racial justice, economic justice, health justice, environmental justice. The causes are grand, but you also have to have some sort of inner orientation in which to navigate your way into and through all of those complex opportunities or challenges that we're facing together collectively. And so, how do you kind of frame at this point in time when we can't meet together collectively? How do you frame some sort of spiritual orientation through this? And the first kind of um, um, what would you call like thoughtful piece I want to challenge you with today is sort of how do you invite insight into your life? And I was struck this week as I was reading a book by Elaine Pagels, who wrote a book called Beyond Belief, which is a wonderful book if you're interested in reading Elaine Pagels. She's a great uh, um, kind of religious scholar. And she reminds us, and me particularly, and hopefully all of us today, that, in the early movements of many religions, including Christianity, they all kind of begin with like the early articulation of a spark of revelation, of new insight, of awareness. And often that is birthed out of what we think of as one individual, whether it be the Buddha or Muhammad or Lao Tzu or Jesus or Moses. This sort of moment when someone looks in the world, sees it in a new way, and then it gives expression to that awareness in a way that captures our imagination. And Elaine Pagels reminds us that over the course of time, and for Christianity it was about in the first 100 years, um, what ends up happening is that kind of energy of capacity for insight, revelation, awareness is then codified and then usually controlled by someone who has some power, and maybe a dogmatic system is sort of created, and then it becomes very rigid, right? It becomes a religion. And what we know is that in the early days of Christianity, particularly, there were just waves and waves and waves of people sparked by some of the new insights that were emerging in the early Christian communities. And in a sense, a diverse array of perspectives and insights and responses that sought for some inner wisdom, outer expressions of compassion, expressions and challenging the times in which they were experiencing, efforts towards greater social and economic justice. It was just a flood of that kind of experience happening in diverse ways. Until, of course, we sort of uh, the leaders at the time decided, we can't have all this diversity. We got to figure out, what is this thing? And then, of course, so many of the voices, the diverse voices, were silenced, and we landed on four stories, the four Gospels primarily, that would capture the essence of that revelation. And from then on, we've used those four stories as sort of our guiding principles of Christianity, what we call the Gospels. But that's not how it all started. It all started with the spark of insight that inspired yet another person and another person and another person and another person. Kind of like, remember the Pentecost story, if you are a person in the Christian faith, this Pentecost story that after the wisdom of Jesus was kind of put down by Rome, this Spirit of God still could not rest and found itself in the form of a flame above everyone's head who gathered together, as if there's this invitation to broad and diverse capacity for insight and wisdom. And so that's what I would challenge yourself to think about during this time. You know, we can't gather. I can't control your religious experience. You're going to have that experience based on the time and energy you put into it. I want you to just think in terms of, how do I invite that kind of spark of insight, like we used with the candle today, that can kind of guide my way into more deeply and through this experience that we've been having together. And to trust that that's really the birthing place for the religious experience, right? You see it over and over again. And even though those voices often get pushed to the margins in many religions, they are the energy. They are the energy that sustain a religion in complicated times. And that was the case in many of our religious traditions around the world. So to kind of, I guess my challenge is, take responsibility. Take responsibility to say, I'm going to do that for myself in these times. And how might you do that? One of the little pieces I want to read for you today, and I'll close with this piece as well, is a piece of wisdom that comes from the Kickapoo tribe that is in Mexico, indigenous people. And one of the wisdom teachers in that tribe writes this: "So now you want to know some things." That a great line. So now you want to know some things. So where do you start? Well, that is a good question for you to answer. Maybe just listen. Listen to the drum. Listen to the air. Listen to the breathing, to the earth breathing. Listen to the stars that go across the sky. Isn't that beautiful? I think one of the ways to invite some insight is that capacity to listen beyond the chatter that can kind of numb you down or confuse you or distract you, but to listen more and more broadly. Did you notice in that little piece of writing, you were listening to that which is close to you and then expanding to the point where now you're hearing the way the stars move across the universe. How do you listen with ears that open and let the insights discovered in that process find some seed in your own soul? I think that's a beautiful challenge for our times. I remember in Christianity, there was a line in one of the stories, for those who have ears to hear, let them hear. How can you find and mature your ears for this time is one pathway to the kind of insights I'm challenging you to explore. That's layer one, I think, as a spiritual person, is this capacity for hearing beyond the clatter. And that leads me to a kind of my second wave for this morning. And that is kind of, finding a way to hear beyond what I would think of as the white noise of culture. I'll share with you today that I have a white noise machine by my bed to help me sleep at night. I have a condition that a lot of people suffer from, with the ringing in my ears constantly. So this white noise machine kind of helps hide that or mask that. And so every night when I crawl into bed, I hit the button and, white noise. And it's basically like a horrible but beautiful blanket of soft noise that encases me so that my body can fall asleep. Just the opposite of what we want in life, right? So But it is a kind of a metaphor sometimes that sometimes there's so much noise, this sort of white noise, and it puts us to sleep, right? We're not aware. Um, and that's the whole point of me falling asleep at night. But it can also be dangerous, right? So how do you push beyond the white noise? Like the indigenous wisdom teacher said, how do we hear more clearly the universe itself? And so one of the experiences I have, which in this white noise thing, is there are nights when I can't fall asleep and I'm up till the wee hours of the morning. And when I get out of bed to go take some ibuprofen or do whatever I got to do, right, I leave that white noise machine for a moment. And the last few nights, the crickets are just chirping everywhere in the night. And I have to tell you that I'm standing there like at 1 in the morning, sometimes later than that, and I'm just listening to the crickets. And I'm reminded again of the beauty of the world, and the sounds of nature and my connection to all of that. And I have to tell you, I would prefer to lie in bed listening to those crickets, hearing their song that's inviting me into that kind of beautiful relationship with the way in which Earth comes alive at night. It takes me back to moments in my childhood as well, where I remember catching crickets and listening. It's this whole thing that happens when I'm actually paying attention to something more beautiful and mysterious and wonderful than the white noise machine by my bed. So that's one of the, like an intro to this next layer, is how do you get in touch with this capacity to hear more clearly? And I think part of it is kind of a reminder of hanging out in those places, either inside of you or outside in the world, that allow you capacity to hear, like 1 a.m. with the crickets, right? Where do you go internally or externally so that you can hear most clearly? Maybe it's rather than scrambling around to find food to eat at dinner time, maybe it's gathering your family or household at a dinner table and sharing stories. Is that a place where you're hearing more clearly? Maybe it's a silent walk in the wilderness that you take on your own. I don't know what it is, but I think you got to find your way into that. One of the great poets that I want to share with you this morning as a transition piece, I think, speaks to it beautifully. It's Billy Collins, who was the poet laureate for the United States for a while. I don't think he is anymore. But he writes this poem. I love Billy Elliot. So if you, Billy Collins, I'm sorry. So if you want to read some of his poetry, it's awesome. This one's called Turning 10. So it's a poem about that moment when you actually turn and become 10 years old. And this sort of weird feeling like you're being disconnected at that moment from all the power of your own youthful imagination and wonderment with the world, right? Because now you turn in 10. We're all turning 10 these days for sure. So here's his poem. See if you like this. The whole idea of turning 10, right? The whole idea of it just makes me feel like I'm coming down with something worse than any stomach ache or the headaches I get from reading in bad light. It's a kind of measles of the spirit, mumps of the psyche, a disfiguring chicken pox of the soul. You tell me as I'm turning 10 that it's too early to look back, but that's because you've forgotten. You've forgotten the perfect simplicity of being 1 year old and the beautiful complexity of turning 2. But I can lie on my bed and I can remember every digit. At 4, I was an Arabian wizard. I could make myself invisible by drinking a a glass of milk in a certain way. At 7, I was a soldier. At 9, I was a prince. But now I'm mostly at the window, and I watch the late afternoon light. Back then, it never fell so solemnly against the side of my treehouse, and my bicycle never leaned against the garage as it does today, all the dark blue speed drained out of it. I say to myself as I turn 10, this is the beginning of sadness. As I walk through the universe in my sneakers, it is a time to say goodbye to all of my imaginary friends. Time to turn to the first big number. It seems like only yesterday I used to believe that there was nothing under my skin but light. If you cut me, I would shine. But now, when I fall upon the sidewalks of life, I skin my knees and I bleed. It seems that only yesterday I used to believe that there was nothing under my skin but light, and if you cut me, I would shine. How do we find our way, like the second naivete that religion talks about all the time, as adults, as senior citizens, as teenagers, this capacity to return back to the kind of the capacity for imagination during these times, and to nurture that and to trust that that is the landscape on which some of these kind of spiritual insights or a sense of reimagining my neighbor or my own life journey can happen. And to trust, like Elaine Pagel said, that that is the birthing place for the religious experience. And yes, certainly you and I have probably framed our religious experience in a traditional religious system, but that doesn't mean we can't continue to find those deep and wondrous places within that reconnect us to sacred, to world, to mystery, to self. And because we're now kind of in this moment collectively, these are the days to do that. And to light those candles that can then be, whether it be one step at a time, stepping stones into our own futures. That's the kind of journey I want to be on. And of course, I want to be on that kind of journey with people just like you. So how can we do that ourselves, and how can we do that collectively? So here's the challenge. Oh, I know. I had this one more thing. How much time we got? 28 minutes? All right. Let's do one more thing. Why do you have to trust this process? You know, that this is possible. And I was remembering as I woke up this morning, and I did sleep last night. I remembered when I woke up this morning the story of Jonah. And it's a great story in the Bible. It's a mythic story, right? So it's in the Christian tradition. No. It's in the Hebrew tradition. Jonah in the belly of the whale. Jonah, God decides that Nineveh, this city, needs to change, right? It needs to turn around. Something has to change in Nineveh. Very similar to our times, right? We're realizing something has to change in our education system, our healthcare system, our race relations, our economics, the way in which we engage the environment. I mean, you name it, it's something got to change in Nineveh, right? We all know it. And so the story goes, and this is, you know, if you will, the sacred calling upon Jonah, divine calling upon Jonah. Whatever grabs hold of Jonah, Jonah is told, you got to go to Nineveh and help those people turn around. I mean, part of your responsibility as a human being is to enter into this space that needs to change, and you have to be one who helps to make that transformation possible. And so what does Jonah do? It's a great story. He does what most of us do. he runs in completely the opposite direction. He says, I'm not going there. He literally goes the other direction. He goes exact opposite of what he should be doing. And he's going to be no help at all, right? He's not going to help at all. And I can totally relate to that, right? I see this need and I'm like, I got something else I got to do. And I head off in the other direction. So what happens to Jonah? Well, eventually he gets swallowed by a whale. He becomes stateless. He becomes stuck in this silent space in the belly of a whale at the depths of the sea. He is placed exactly where you and I find ourselves in this moment, right? This whale belly, if you will, of holding our own during the pandemic. He's in the belly of the whale. And inside there, he has to do self-reflection. I think the text has him praying and doing all sorts of things, right? He's got to find some spark of hope or wisdom that's going to get him through this time. In the end, after he spends time in the belly of the whale spits him out. And where does the whale spit him out? On the shores of Nineveh. There is no escaping Nineveh, it turns out. There is no escaping the challenges that our world is facing. You got some whale belly time, but you will find yourself spit out onto the shore. What will you carry with you when you take your early steps onto that shore? I think that's the spiritual journey that I'm on and you're on as well. Okay? All right. So let's close with the project I want to give you. There's a lot of things there for you to think about if you want to. I'm certainly thinking about them. So here's my challenge to you. And this is total like arts and crafts project, but I think it's going to help. There is a sense of in the old Hebrew tradition of before the people of Israel started out on this new journey into a new future, right? They painted blood and made references. They painted blood on their doorposts, which is blood is a symbol for life. And I think there's a way to kind of replicate that. And here would be my challenge to you, and that is it will take a couple of items around the house. One will be yarn, probably some clothespins or a stapler, and some blank 3x5 cards. Sure, you can turn it off now if you want, but it's arts and crafts time. And I would challenge you to take the yarn and string it like you do at Christmas time with Christmas cards or whatever, and string it over a doorway of the of your office or of your house, or maybe around the kitchen, or some place where this thing can be hung. And then leave the blank 3x5 cards on your desk or on the kitchen table. If you've got kids, get them engaged. And as you begin to develop some thoughtful reflections for our time, either draw a picture of it on a card or write down an insight from that card. Clearly, things like Black Lives Matter, if that has struck you, you could do something around that. For me, it's I'm so reminded that the earth and I need to be in the kind of a uber deep relationship, particularly at this time. How do I foster that? I would do something about that. I'd write it on the card and then I would clip it to the yarn so that every time I move through that arch of insight and wisdom, it's reminding me of how will I find my way back into Nineveh. And once you create that and have that around for a while, and if you do it and it's got some energy, I want you to take a picture of it and send it to me. All right? And I'll post up some of the pictures and the insights of what you created at home as part of the project. And Lori and I haven't told Lori about this, but we'll commit to doing it and try it out for a while and just see what it feels like to both nurture some inner wisdom, trusting that that's where the energy of the religious experience often resides, finding access points to allow you to hear more clearly and to find expression for those, then articulating them and building this passageway that then when you walk through, what does that do for you? Does it start to build your capacity to journey out of the whale belly onto the shore in a new way? Because you're starting to build, in a sense, this kind of a wisdom tunnel that you move through that leaves its residue on your soul long enough that you become a different person on the other side. That's it. All right. So that's all I've got for this Sunday. I'm hoping that some of the little thoughts along the way sparked some of your own wonder and thoughtfulness, and that it can serve as sort of a springboard for your own spiritual reflections in the days ahead. So let me close one more time with a little wisdom from the Kickapoo tribe. So now you want to know some things. So where do you start? Well, that really is a good question for you to answer. So maybe just listen. Listen to the drum. Listen to the air. Listen to the breathing, to the earth breathing. Listen to the stars go across the sky. My hope for you is that you will, despite our times, whether you're a child, an adult, or an adult finding your child again, that you will hear. You will hear some stuff down there in the belly, and it will be a guiding light for you, and I hope a guiding light for me and the world as well. Amen to that. Okay, thanks for being a part of the day. Just a quick, I don't have a lot of announcements today, except Martin played this beautiful piece that's an old spiritual for folks really struggling in their own time and having this kind of vision for the future. And it's a wayfarer's song. A wayfarer is someone who's slugging it out one step at a time through a difficult environment, trying to paint a picture of a hopeful future despite the conditions they're in. And you can read the lyrics sometimes. They're beautiful lyrics. Of course, for them, the hope was for an afterlife, some world beyond this one. But we all know that our world is like the shores of Nineveh. We will find ourselves there again. Who will we be when we take our first few steps? All right. Take care, everyone.